Have you ever felt it? That quiet moment where the air suddenly feels heavier? Because somewhere, a private conversation just happened, and your name was spoken, not lightly, not as gossip, not as a joke, but with regret in the voice. Aries, someone is struggling right now, not because of you, but because they can't escape what they did, or what they never said. You may have already healed, you may have already moved forward, but they're still stuck, replaying the same truth over and over. And here's the thing, they're hoping for one conversation, one chance to finally clear the air. So, before we go any further, take a breath. Trust what you feel. If this found you, it's not random. And what comes next might change how you see everything. Aries, let me talk to you like I would if we were sitting across from each other right now. No noise, no rush. Because what happened didn't happen loudly. It didn't happen in public. There was no announcement, no message sent to you. It happened quietly, behind closed doors, in a moment where someone finally stopped pretending they were okay. Picture this, a room with dim light, a pause in the conversation. That moment where someone exhales and says, "I need to talk about something I've been carrying," and then your name appears, not casually, not with confidence, but with weight. You weren't brought up as a story to entertain. You were brought up as a truth they could no longer ignore. They didn't go looking for gossip. They went looking for relief, for forgiveness they don't know how to give themselves. And here's what matters, Aries. You didn't force this moment. You didn't demand it. You didn't chase it. This conversation happened because silence became too heavy for them to carry alone. They spoke about how things fell apart, about the moments they replay late at night, about what they should have said, and what they never had the courage to admit. They didn't talk about you like someone from the past. They talked about you like an open wound that never healed. You see, you may have already done the work. You may have already made peace with what was. You may have chosen growth instead of bitterness. But they didn't. They stayed behind in that moment. That one turning point where everything could have gone differently. And now they're stuck there, still asking themselves how they lost someone who saw them so clearly. Someone who didn't need them to perform. Someone who didn't ask for perfection, only honesty. There's a certain kind of pain that shows up when someone realizes they weren't misunderstood. They were afraid to say the truth, afraid to own the damage, afraid to admit that they mattered less to themselves than their pride did. That's what this conversation was really about. Not you moving on, but them realizing they never did. And the energy around this, it's different now. This wasn't denial. This wasn't deflection. This was the first time they stopped running from what they felt. The first time they allowed the truth to exist out loud. Aries, that doesn't mean you owe them anything. It means something inside them finally cracked open. And cracks. That's where light gets in. So, take a breath here. Let the moment settle. Because when a truth is spoken in private like this, it doesn't fade away. It starts moving. Quietly at first, then with intention. And what unfolds next won't come from noise or drama. It will come from choice. Stay with me. There's more unfolding beneath the surface. Aries, there's something you should know. What they're going through right now has very little to do with you, and everything to do with the moment they can't escape inside themselves. They're stuck in a narrow hallway of memory. Every door leads back to the same place, the same choice, the same silence. It's not dramatic on the outside. No chaos, no loud collapse. It's quiet. That kind of quiet where someone keeps moving through life but never really leaves the room where things went wrong. They wake up and function. They smile when they need to. They distract themselves. They stay busy. But underneath all of that, there's a question looping like a low hum they can't turn off. What if I had just been honest? What if I hadn't waited? What if I hadn't protected my pride instead of my heart? You see, forgiving another person is one thing. Forgiving yourself is an entirely different kind of work. And that's where they're stuck. They replay moments you probably stopped replaying a long time ago. Not because you mattered more than their life now, but because you represented the version of themselves they didn't have the courage to become back then. That's a hard truth to sit with. It's easier to blame circumstances, easier to say timing was off, easier to pretend it just wasn't meant to be. But they can't hide behind that story anymore, because deep down, they know. They didn't lose you because fate interfered. They lost you because they hesitated when truth was asking to be spoken. Aries, you've always been someone who moves forward once you see clearly. Once you feel it in your body, you don't linger. That's not how they're built. They linger. They stay in the echo of what was said too late, or never said at all. And the hardest part for them isn't missing you. It's missing who they could have been if they had shown up fully. That's the real grief. They look back now and see how much you offered without forcing anything, how you stood there open while they stayed guarded, and that realization doesn't leave them. It follows them into quiet evenings, into long drives, into moments where they pause and feel something tighten in their chest for no obvious reason. You may have already released the past, but they're still negotiating with it, still asking that same question in different forms, still hoping time might bend backward if they think hard enough. And here's where the energy shifts, because staying stuck eventually becomes unbearable. There comes a moment when regret either hardens someone or softens them. And right now, they're right at that edge, not ready to move yet, but no longer able to stay where they are. So let yourself breathe into that truth, not with expectation, not with attachment, just awareness. Because what's unfolding next won't be driven by fear anymore. It will be driven by a need for relief, for alignment, for peace. And that kind of movement always begins quietly. Stay with me. We're moving deeper now. Aries. There's a moment in every reckoning where the truth finally stops hiding. Not because someone forces it out, but because the weight of carrying it becomes heavier than the fear of being seen. That's where they are now. In that private conversation, they didn't defend themselves. They didn't rewrite the story. They didn't soften the edges. They said it plainly. I was wrong, and that admission didn't come easily. You don't say those words unless something inside you has already cracked. They know they hurt you. Not in an abstract way, not as a concept. They understand now that it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a choice, a moment where they chose comfort over courage. And that realization sits with them differently than regret ever did, because regret still allows distance. It keeps things theoretical. But this is personal. They know an apology alone doesn't repair what was broken. They know words don't rewind time. They know saying I'm sorry doesn't erase the nights you questioned yourself. And that's exactly why they hesitate. Not because they don't care, but because they finally do. You see, Aries, what they're afraid of isn't rejection. It's exposure. It's the moment where they would have to sit across from you and hold the full weight of what their silence did to you. How it made you doubt. How it made you pull back. How it forced you to become strong in ways you never asked for. They don't fear your anger. They fear your clarity. They know you don't need to be convinced. You don't need explanations wrapped in excuses. You don't need them to win an argument. All you ever wanted was to be heard, to be acknowledged, to have your experience treated as real. And that's what terrifies them. Because once they say it out loud, there's no hiding behind intention. No hiding behind confusion. No hiding behind timing. They would have to look at you and accept that they were the one who stepped back when connection asked them to step forward. That takes humility, real humility. And they're still learning how to sit with that. So they stand at the edge of that conversation, close enough to feel it, close enough to imagine it, but not yet ready to fully step in. You might feel that pause, that hesitation in the air, not as absence, but as pressure. Like a storm building quietly before the sky decides what it's going to release. Aries, this moment isn't asking you to wait. It isn't asking you to soften your boundaries. It isn't asking you to reopen wounds. It's simply revealing something important. They see now that the power in this dynamic has shifted, not because you took it, but because you grew into yourself. And growth does that. It changes the shape of the room. So as this energy continues to move, don't rush it. Don't label it. Just notice. Because when someone finally admits the truth to themselves, the next step is never small. And whatever comes next won't be driven by fear alone anymore. It will be driven by the need to make things right. Stay here with me. We're not done unfolding this yet. Aries, there's a point where truth starts to feel restless. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply refuses to stay buried any longer. That's the space they're standing in now. For a long time, they convinced themselves that silence was safer, that leaving things unsaid would somehow protect everyone involved, that if they waited long enough, the feeling would pass. But truth doesn't disappear. It waits. It gathers in the corners of conversations never finished. in the pauses between words that almost came out, in the wait behind sentences that stopped too soon. They carried things they never shared, not because they were careless, but because they didn't trust themselves to handle what would follow once everything was exposed. They made choices that looked calm on the surface, but underneath, nothing was settled. They told themselves half stories. They chose ambiguity when clarity felt too dangerous. They stayed quiet when honesty would have changed the course of everything. And now, those moments are returning, not as punishment, but as reminders. They said something during that private conversation that mattered more than they realized. They said they wanted to say everything, all of it, finally. But the fear in their voice wasn't about losing you in the future. It was about facing the version of you they hurt in the past. Because once truth is spoken, it can't be reshaped. It can't be softened. It simply stands there. And that kind of honesty asks for courage that can't be borrowed. They're standing at the edge of that confession now. You can feel it in the energy, that subtle tension, that stillness before something shifts. It's like watching someone hesitate at the shoreline, knowing the water is cold, knowing it will change them once they step in. They're afraid that once they tell the truth, there will be no version of the story where they are innocent, no place to hide behind misunderstanding, no way to rewrite what happened. And that scares them more than distance ever did. Aries. This isn't about secrets coming out to shock you. It's about integrity trying to re-enter the room. They know now that holding back didn't protect the connection. It slowly drained it, and the realization that silence caused more damage than honesty has been difficult to sit with. They're not afraid of consequences. They're afraid of finality. Afraid that once the truth is spoken, the outcome will be real, unchangeable. But here's the part you should feel into. Truth doesn't always arrive to end things. Sometimes it arrives to realign them. Sometimes it's not there to reopen wounds. It's there to stop the bleeding. You've already done the hardest part. You faced reality without needing it to bend in your favor. You allowed yourself to see clearly and still choose growth. They're just arriving at that point now. And the space between almost telling the truth and actually saying it is one of the most transformative places a person can stand. It strips away illusion. It demands maturity. It asks for humility. So, if you sense something hovering in the air lately, that feeling that something unspoken is pressing closer, trust it. Because truth doesn't surface to destroy. It surfaces to make room for what's real. Stay with me. The moment they choose honesty is closer than it appears. Aries. There's something quietly undeniable about this part of the story. No matter how far they tried to move, the connection didn't loosen. They walked away in all the ways people usually do. They filled their days. They changed routines. They told themselves they were fine. On the outside, it looked convincing. Life kept moving. Responsibilities were handled. Time passed. But inside, something stayed unfinished. They tried replacing the feeling with motion, with noise, with distraction. They told themselves that if they stayed busy enough, the emptiness would fade. It didn't. Because what you shared wasn't something that could be swapped out. It wasn't a habit. It wasn't a phase. It was presence. And once someone experiences presence like that, everything else feels thin by comparison. They tried connecting with other people, not to hurt you, not to prove anything, but to see if the ache would disappear. It didn't, because no one else held the same mirror. No one else met them at the same depth. No one else asked them to be as real as you did without even trying. And that's when the silence started to feel louder. The absence wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like walking into a familiar room and realizing something essential was missing, even though you can't name exactly what it is. They noticed it in the quiet moments, late evenings, early mornings, moments where there was no one to perform for. That's when it became clear. They weren't missing companionship. They were missing alignment. You see, Aries, when you pulled your energy back, you didn't punish them. You simply stopped supplying what they refused to meet halfway. And that revealed everything. Without your presence anchoring things, their world felt oddly hollow, not empty of people, but empty of meaning. They said it out loud in that conversation. Not dramatically, not to gain sympathy, just honestly. They said nothing filled the space, that no matter what they tried, the void remained. Because the connection wasn't about constant contact, it was about resonance. And resonance doesn't disappear just because distance exists. They're beginning to understand that now. Not in a romanticized way, but in a sobering one. They see that the connection didn't trap them. It challenged them. It asked them to grow, to show up, to be accountable. And instead of answering that call, they stepped away. Now they're standing in the echo of that choice. This isn't longing in the usual sense. It's recognition. The kind that arrives once illusions fall away. They recognize that what they lost wasn't just you. It was the version of themselves that existed when you were around. The version that felt more awake, more honest, more aligned. And that realization is impossible to outrun. Aries, you didn't cause this awakening. You didn't plan it. You didn't wait for it. You simply honored yourself. And sometimes that's enough to shift another person's entire inner landscape. So, if you've felt a strange stillness lately, a sense that something is circling back in a quieter form, trust that. Because when someone can no longer escape a truth, they stop running, they start listening. And listening is where the next movement begins. Stay close. There's more stirring beneath the surface. Aries, what's happening now doesn't make noise. There's no dramatic reach out, no sudden confession, no impulsive message sent in the middle of the night. And that silence, it's not emptiness, it's focus. They're moving carefully now, not because they don't feel urgency, but because they finally understand what's at stake. They know one wrong step could close a door they may never get back to. So instead of rushing, they pause. They replay conversations in their head. They imagine how you might look at them if they showed up too soon, or too late, or said the wrong thing. They're thinking about timing in a way they never did before, not to manipulate, but to avoid causing more harm. That alone tells you something has shifted. They want to speak to you. That desire is real. But this time, they don't want words to spill out unshaped. They don't want to speak from panic, or guilt, or loneliness. They want to speak from truth. And that takes restraint. They're rehearsing silence the same way some people rehearse speeches, letting moments pass, watching, listening to what isn't being said. They're paying attention now, to the space between interactions, to how you've changed, to how your energy no longer reaches outward the way it once did. That's what scares them most. Not losing you loudly, but losing you quietly, because quiet loss feels final. They're aware that this isn't a moment they get to redo. They don't have room for trial and error anymore. That's why they're keeping this close, why they're not letting outside voices interfere, why they haven't involved anyone who could dilute the intention. This plan isn't about strategy, it's about respect. They want to approach you in a way that doesn't ask you to fix anything, doesn't ask you to reassure them, doesn't ask you to soften your boundaries. They want to meet you where you are now, not where you used to be. And that requires patience. It requires humility. It requires sitting with uncertainty without trying to control the outcome. They know this isn't about getting you back. It's about whether they can show up as someone worthy of being heard. That awareness didn't exist before. Aries, if you feel a strange calm around this connection lately, a sense that something is aligning behind the scenes, that's not your imagination. It's the energy of someone finally understanding that access to you is no longer automatic. You didn't withdraw to punish. You withdrew to protect your peace, and peace changes the rules. So, whatever unfolds next won't come from impulse. It will come from intention, from someone choosing to move forward with care instead of fear. And when a person learns to slow down like this, to measure their words, to respect timing, it means they're no longer running, they're preparing. So stay present, stay grounded. You don't need to anticipate anything. You don't need to open doors prematurely. Just remain where you are. Because when silence becomes this deliberate, it's usually a sign that something meaningful is gathering its strength. And we're not at the surface anymore. We're moving into deeper waters now. Aries, there was something else that came up in that private conversation. Something subtle, but powerful. They kept coming back to how different you feel now. Not colder, not distant, just steady. They noticed the way you no longer reach out to fill silence, the way you no longer explain yourself, the way your energy doesn't lean forward anymore. And that shift, it shook them, because for the first time, they weren't the one holding space. They were the one standing outside of it. They spoke about your calm, how it doesn't come from indifference. It comes from self-respect. You didn't harden, you grounded. And that's something they weren't prepared for. They remember a version of you that tried, that waited, that gave them room to figure things out. But the person you are now doesn't chase clarity. You live inside it. They see how you move through life differently, how you no longer need reassurance, how you don't need to control outcomes. You trust yourself. And Aries, that kind of strength is quiet, but it's unmistakable. They realize something in that moment, something they hadn't allowed themselves to admit before. They weren't afraid of losing the relationship back then. They were afraid of losing control. But now, control isn't even on the table, because you're not asking for anything. You're not demanding answers. You're not waiting at the edge of possibility. You're standing firmly in your own center. And that's what changed the way they see you. They talked about how your presence used to feel familiar, comfortable, predictable. Now it feels expansive, untouchable in a way that commands respect. They understand now that your calm isn't something they can influence. It exists whether they show up or not. And that realization flipped the dynamic. They said it quietly, almost surprised by their own honesty. They're the one who's afraid now. Afraid that they waited too long. Afraid that you've outgrown the version of them that hesitated. Afraid that your strength no longer leaves room for excuses. You see, when someone grows without bitterness, without resentment, without needing closure, it forces others to confront themselves. Your peace became a mirror, and what they saw in it was their own uncertainty. They noticed that you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain your worth. You don't need to remind anyone what you bring to the table. You simply are. And that kind of presence makes people either rise or retreat. They're standing in that moment now, trying to understand how someone can be so strong without being loud. How someone can walk away from chaos and still keep their heart open. Aries, this isn't about them finally valuing you. You were always valuable. This is about them realizing that access to you is no longer guaranteed, and that truth has weight. So if you've felt a subtle shift in how you carry yourself lately, a deeper breath in your chest, a steadier gaze when you look ahead, honor that. You didn't become this version of yourself to be seen. You became it to be free. And sometimes, freedom is what finally teaches others what they almost lost. Stay with me. There's one last layer to this story, and it's where everything truly turns. Aries, this is where the story shifts its weight. Not with noise, not with promises, not with dramatic gestures, but with truth finally standing on its own feet. That private conversation was never about pulling you back. It wasn't about convincing you. It wasn't about fixing things with words. It was the moment they stopped running from themselves. They reached a place where excuses no longer worked, where denial felt heavier than accountability, where staying the same became more painful than changing. And that matters, because for the first time, the question inside them changed. It stopped being about whether you would come back, or whether they could still reach you. It became about whether they were capable of meeting you without shrinking, without hiding, without asking you to carry what was never yours. They understand now that if they were to step toward you again, it wouldn't be as the person who hesitated. It would have to be as someone new, someone grounded, someone honest, someone willing to stand in discomfort instead of avoiding it. That realization didn't come with confidence. It came with humility, and humility changes people. Aries, you didn't cause this transformation by waiting. You didn't create it by hoping. You created it by choosing yourself. By stepping into your own life without looking back to see who followed. That's what shifted everything. Because when someone sees that you are whole without them, they can no longer approach you from entitlement. They either rise or they stay behind. And that's the quiet power you hold now. Not power over them, power within yourself. This moment isn't asking you to reopen doors. It's not asking you to decide anything yet. It's simply showing you where you stand. You're no longer at the edge of this story. You're at the center of your own. And that means the choice ahead is yours. Not made from longing, not made from fear, but made from alignment. You get to decide who enters your world now, who has access to your time, your energy, your heart. And if they step forward, it won't be because they miss you. It will be because they finally understand you. And even then, you are not obligated to open the door. Sometimes the most powerful thing an Aries can do is pause, breathe, and listen to their own inner fire. So, sit with this moment. Let it settle in your body, because whatever comes next won't feel rushed. It won't feel confusing. It won't pull you off center. It will feel clear. And clarity is how you know you're exactly where you're meant to be. Stay here for a moment longer. There's peace in this space. Aries, before you leave this space, let me tell you something important. If this story reached you tonight, it wasn't to bring the past back into your hands. It was to remind you how far you've come. Not everyone gets to witness the moment when someone finally realizes what they lost. Not everyone grows strong enough to stand steady without needing an answer. But you did, and that's not an accident. So, whatever comes next, whether they speak or stay silent, whether they rise or fall away, you don't lose, because you already chose yourself. Take a moment here. Place a hand on your chest. Feel that quiet fire inside you. That's your truth. That's your compass. If this message touched you, leave a comment below. Not for anyone else, for yourself. And if you're ready to keep walking this path together, subscribe and stay close. This journey isn't over yet. Another message is coming, deeper, clearer. Until then, trust yourself, Aries.